Hey everyone, Chris here. Just a word before we get started. During this podcast, I reference and pull a quote from a woman who gave an excellent encapsulation of some of the issues that we discuss in the course of this show. Unfortunately, at the time of the recording, I could not remember what her name was, so I'm rectifying that right now. Her name is Kimberly Jones. She's an author and an activist, and this is the attribution that she so justly deserves. On with the show.
Greetings, Dr. Beckett. Welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast.
In 2017, the military gathered a small group of scientists to try and bring the Quantum Leap time travel program back online. 5 years later, believing it was the only way to save his fiancée's life, Dr. Ben Song risked everything when he entered the accelerator to travel back in time. He awoke to find himself trapped in the past, facing mirror images that were not his own, and driven by an unknown force to change history for the better. Ben believed he would only need to complete 18 leaps before he could return to the place and people he calls home. But something went wrong. Ben! No! And for reasons unknown, Ben did not leap home.
You are listening to the Quantum Leap Podcast. This is episode 151, One Night in Koreatown.
Excuse me. You sure these are real? Because I ain't paying for no knockoffs.
Let me check. I haven't seen these in years. I remember when these came out. I always wanted a pair, but my mom couldn't afford it.
Yeah. Stop daydreaming, huh? The troublemaker is back. You keep eye on him. Make sure he don't steal nothing.
And don't let Dad see this. You know how he feels about Dwayne?
Yeah, doesn't seem like he trusts him very much.
He doesn't trust anyone who's not Korean.
What's all this?
A special breakfast for a special lady on a special day. Happy first date anniversary.
My favorite. Oh, Magic, you're just the best.
No, man, why you tripping, Mr. P? You go, or I call the police.
What's going on? What happened?
I was just checking out those 5 Adidas when your dad starts coming at me, calling me a thief. Every day, you come here, and all you do is looking. No pie. Next time I see you in your store, I call the police. For real.
You wouldn't happen to have a black leather Oxford men's 14.
Magic. Wow. Did not see that coming. Welcome to Park Shoe Shack here in the heart of Koreatown. From what I gather, my name is Daniel Park, and this leap has something to do with the family store. But there's still some blanks there that I was hoping my hologram could fill me in on.
The 4 LAPD officers in the Rodney King beating case found not guilty on all counts except one.
Do you know what day this is?
April 29th, 1992, the day the LA riots began.
It seems like this whole city just exploded.
I can't possibly be here to stop all that, right, Magic?
No. According to the original history, Park's shoe shack was ransacked. Jen tried to protect his store and was killed. Looks like you're here to save him.
We're closing the store and getting the hell out of here, now! Why are you just standing there? Come on, let's go!
Go where? They're closing all the roads into and out of Koreatown.
He's right, Ben. There's no way out now.
Welcome to the Quantum Leap Podcast, everyone. I'm Christopher DeFilippis.
And I'm Matt Dale.
And today we will be talking about Season 2, Episode 5 of Quantum Leap, One Night in Koreatown. And Matt, I can't tell you, after all of the serious stuff that we went through last week, it was so nice to just have a nice, lighthearted episode this week. Wasn't it terrific?
Right.
Oh boy, this one was heavy.
I mean, we knew what was coming, right? Because this goes back to the trailer at the end of episode 1 of this season, if not rumours beforehand, where we were seeing everything that was coming up, and it was clear this season was going to be full of lots of action and adventure, and then they throw in the clips of the LA riots, and you think, yeah, okay, there's going to be at least one heavy episode in the middle. So I think we were warned. We knew.
I mean, I guess, and it's just carrying on a grand Quantum Leap tradition of doing issues-oriented programming that really make you think on many different levels when you just want to watch Ben have fun leaping. This is, I think, maybe one of the most serious episodes of the new series. It's definitely the most serious episode of this season, and I'm happy to announce that we have an interview with the writers of this episode. Matt, you want to tell everybody how this went down?
Yeah, so this is we've got a lengthy old interview with Ben Raab and Deric Hughes, the writers, and they're just a couple of lovely guys. I mean, I reached out to them and said, "Hey, you might have heard of us," and Ben came back immediately saying, "Of course we've heard of you. We listen to you." So it was not a difficult get, to be honest, and I wish I'd made that connection sooner because it would have been lovely to talk to them last season as well. But better late than never. We bounced some messages around and managed to get them on a few days back for the recording. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it because it was such a lovely chat.
It's one I was actually able to sit in on, and it was so great to speak to some of the creators and really diving deep into this episode. It was very gratifying. So I can't wait to present it either. I think all of you out there listening, you are going to enjoy it, hopefully as much as we enjoyed doing it. And we will be bringing you that interview after the break. So stay tuned for that. But there's a long way to go between here and there because
we got a lot to unpack.
Black on White on Fire much?
Yes, but no. I mean, I love the fact that we all must have, fans of the original series must have all gone into it and seeing that trailer and thinking, yeah, this is going to be compared to Black and White on Fire. And, I mean, you can't not. We already have. We're, 2 minutes in and we've already referenced it.
Yeah, I did it right to Deric, too, while we were talking about it. So, yeah, I can't help it because that's such a seminal episode of the classic for me. So,
yeah, and I think Deric, as you'll hear in the interview, Deric knew that was coming. I think anyone who's a fan of the original series would be crazy not to expect the comparisons. But it's such a different type of episode that from a creative standpoint, I don't think they should be compared. They've done some really cool, interesting stuff that makes it very much standalone. It's not better or worse than Black and White on Fire. It's just not worth comparing them.
Oh, wow. I think that's kind of a bold statement. I don't know if it's not worth comparing, but I agree with you in the sense that it is very much its own episode. It doesn't stand in any episode's shadow.
Yes.
It's got its own message, and it's as valid an episode of any episode of Quantum Leap. It doesn't have to be compared. You're right, but I don't think that they're incomparable. I think that maybe they stand side by side as good examples of good Quantum Leap. Whoops, I spoiled my initial and final impressions.
Shall I share my first impressions then?
Your first and final impressions?
My first and final impressions. Yeah, this was everything that I was hoping. It got me thinking. I watched it with my partner and it got us talking about some pretty hefty stuff. And it was entertaining. And yes, if you're going to pull that comparison with Black and White on Fire, I think it stands up very well to it. So yes, this was exactly what I'd hoped when I saw those clips in that trailer and when I'd heard the rumours that they were going to do the LA riots. Everything that I'd hoped for came true in this one and more. Oh boy, and more.
Yeah, and more. And I think that's where it really stands out. I mean, where this more traditional episode of the classic series, like we saw in Black on White on Fire, you would have some good character work in the Leap, but the new Quantum Leap has to address the back at the project stuff. And this one did an exemplary job of addressing the back at the project stuff, specifically focusing on the character of Magic. We didn't get much project, but we got a lot of character development of Magic in this one. And I think that uniquely makes it one of the better examples of how the new Quantum Leap can do its job very well in making an ensemble show, but also maybe sometimes focusing more on one character than another. And I feel like this is maybe the first time we've gotten, I think, an episode focused specifically on one character per se. And it's also the most we've ever seen discussed about Magic. Like, we know more about Magic now than we ever have, which I think is really great. And I think this episode deserves to be celebrated for that alone. So, yeah, It was everything I was expecting and so much more, kind of like what you just said, Matt. So, and the one thing that we were expecting, of course, was a deep dive into the LA riots and ideas and themes of racism and systemic injustice. And that's one thing as an American. I don't know if it's because it's been so ingrained in our recent history, where I grew up learning about the 60s and like the tensions. And then I lived through the LA riots. I was in the newsroom. I was in journalism school at the radio station when the riots broke out. So, I mean, I was there sort of in real time watching it unfold. I mean, that's one of the perks of being in journalism. And I just happened to be in the newsroom that day instead of class. So, I mean, we were all just, riveted onto the wire feeds and onto the television and just seeing how everything was progressing. So it was kind of surreal to relive this, but having lived through the time and having, I guess, maybe a historical vernacular for this type of event in American history, unfortunately, I wonder how me watching this compares to you watching it as someone from the UK. And is there even a difference?
There's definitely a difference, and I'm going to tread slightly carefully here because this is a topic that's come up on the show before a few times, and no one's called me out on it yet. But here goes anyway. I'm a white, middle-aged, middle-class guy, so anything that I say about racism in the UK is coming from a position of privilege. That being said, and with that caveat aside, I can't think of anything comparable in the history of the UK over the last few decades as to this and some of the other things that have happened in the US over the last few decades. So although we've got tremendous racism problems here as well, when I see something like this, I struggle to get it. And I remember I would have been 11 during the LA riots. So I remember it happening, but it was, as much as it would be from an outsider's point of view, being a little white kid in a little white town, it was even more of an outsider's point of view because I was watching this happening on TV in a country many, many miles away. And it takes shows like this to try and, ironically, it takes the fiction to try and make it more real to me and to bring it home. And shows like Black and White on Fire and now One Night in Koreatown help bring it home, but it's not in that kind of way that you're connecting to a memory. I'm being taught, I guess. I don't know if taught is the right word, but it's helping me understand it, which, yeah, so I probably have a very different experience of these shows just because of my lack of experience, both being white and being British.
I don't know if I can say that it was, I'm just trying to pick up on a thread of what you said, in the sense that, okay, it's not something that I think I was used to. It's something that is part of our history. So I've learned about it, but this happening in real time was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that in my lifetime that I could remember. I was an adult. I was 22, and I was just like as incensed and outraged about the verdict as anybody else. And then when the riots started, the C.S. Lee. Can we just talk about C.S. Lee? He played Mr. Park in this episode, Jin Park, and he, to me, personified every voice that I heard around me in suburban white New York, ironically, that you heard him say,
Rodney King was a criminal.
That they beat 56 times on camera.
The police to protect our community, those officers just doing their job. Justice was served.
And it's up to Ben to enlighten him and say, no, it's not about, it's systemic injustice. It's this, it's that. And meanwhile, everybody around me is talking about, why would you do that to your own community? And how can this happen? And why would you be against the police? And it's just like, well, what are you talking about? Did you see the video? Yeah. How can anybody get off on that? And then everybody's talking about, well, you didn't see the whole thing. You just saw highlights that they showed on the news, and you're seeing out of context. And I remember at the time thinking, okay, I know I'm a journalist. I know I'm supposed to be impartial and we're just reporting on this, but what other context do you need when you see that video? It is just, it's appalling and arresting. And it's just like, how, So anyway, there was a lot of back and forth back then. And I feel like the fact that they had Jin talking about it in a way that I heard it talked about most often in my experience did a great service to the episode, because it didn't just come down on one side or another. It showed that people had different points of view back then. And even someone in the neighborhood that was affected, that could be threatened by everything going on, that probably was also somehow a victim of some kind of systemic injustice as a minority. I think it helped round out the episode to make it more realistic instead of just like a morality play where everybody says, oh, racism is bad. Okay, well, we all know racism is bad, but there are always shades of people who you talk to who have different opinions and different ideas. And it was nice to see that represented. And it was also nice to see somebody with that mindset learn how to change their mind throughout the course of the episode. I mean, granted, the circumstances were dire, right? It really took a lot for him to change his mind, but he got there in the end. And I think that's a mark of Quantum Leap and of good science fiction. So I don't know, maybe that's too personal or too anecdotal to translate to the listeners out there. What did you think of that character?
I think, just to your point, I think a lot of people will relate to your personal anecdotal story. As for C.S. Lee, yeah, what a great concept for a character for all the reasons you mentioned. And for me, and as I said, I watched this with my partner and we were talking through it, which we don't usually. This actually sparked some discussion. I think Jin's character gave us a view in that we wouldn't otherwise have, again, being somewhat separated both through our privileged lives and through not having quite that same history that you guys have. It was great seeing this through the eyes of effectively a bystander. And I've got to be honest, before this episode was announced, I had no idea about Koreatown or any of the stuff that was happening here. I just saw this as another the LA riots. Again, I was 11 at the time, so excuse my lack of historical awareness. The LA riots were black people versus white people, and it was as simple as that. I wasn't really aware of the impact it had on the Koreans, for example. And so it was great having that view in, and it's what caused my partner to turn to me and say, but I don't understand. There's been this horrible injustice. It's happened. Yes, they're angry. Why are they taking it out on other people? Why are they not attacking the police? Why this poor shop owner? And it's effectively what Louisa, the nurse, says at one point. What did I do to deserve this?
I'm a nurse. I help people. What did I ever do to make someone so angry that they would do this to me?
They're not angry with you. It's the system.
Yeah, well, I'm angry too. I'm a single mother working her ass off to make ends meet, and I just lost my one and only way to get to work, and I can't afford to repair or replace it because I can't afford the insurance.
That caused some discussion. We were both trying to pick that apart, and it was so helpful being able to look at that through Jin's eyes and try and figure out, well, yes, we think we're on the side of right here, but we still don't understand why people riot. How does that happen? And as I say, we had some discussion about it, and I don't think we can ever really fully understand it because we've not been subject to systemic injustice all our lives. So we can't understand it. But Jin's character prompted those questions, and I'll be forever grateful for that because it was a really interesting insight.
Yeah, and I mean, I've since come against that question. It was one of the questions I first asked when I saw what was going on. I said, but that's your community. Why are you tearing it down? But I think since, some more recent incidences from just a few years ago.
Yes.
We have so much more access to individual voices now than we did back then. Back then it was reporting. Now social media is everywhere, so you can get the individual experiences of people on the ground in real time. And I was watching a fascinating video by one woman. I don't recall her name, but she was talking about how can we overrun this community? And that was just like a head-turning moment for me in the sense that, you know what, it's just this system that keeps perpetuating, keeping a certain segment of the population down to the point where no wonder why you just want to tear it down.
Yeah.
Because it's just, no matter what you do, every generation gets oppressed anew. And God, you're right, man. We're just like two middle-aged white dudes talking about this. I feel like such an asshole. Anybody out there listening, just bear with us stumbling through this stuff. I'm so sorry.
I think we are trying to understand, and I hope people can tell we're coming at this from a place of trying to wrap our heads around it, as opposed to any kind of criticism of what went down. It's just, I accept now, at the age that I am, that I've got through so much of my life without experiencing this. I will never be able to understand why people feel forced to riot in that way. And that's not me saying that they shouldn't or that it's wrong. I just can't get my head around it.
Just to put a bow on some of the thoughts that I have on C.S. Lee's character on Park, I'm just going to say it. I like that they made him sort of racist.
That boy is a no good criminal.
Why? Because he's black?
You don't know how many people I heard say the same thing. If you recall the scene when they were talking about Reginald Denny getting pulled out of his truck and being beaten in the middle of the riots, that was shown almost as much as the cops beating Rodney King. And it just struck me as like I was in the freaking Twilight Zone back then when people are watching the severe beating of Rodney King and saying, well, that's justice and that's the police doing their job. And then they're watching Reginald Denny get pulled out of his truck and like getting hit in the head with cinder blocks and saying, those are animals. And he even says animals. I was just like, huh? How it's all the same. All of it's indefensible. So it's like, how is one justice and the other one a crime? And it brought me right back to all of the conflicting emotions and feelings I was having at that time, again, as I watched this unfold. One of the more formative events of my adult life. And it, like you said, Matt, you're secondhand. You're in the UK. You're not American, but it was secondhand for me too. I was on the East Coast. I'm a New Yorker. You know, to me, LA is as far away as La La Land. Yeah. So, as in LA is La La Land. But anyway, you all know what it is. But, yeah, so, I mean, I had a lot to learn too, and it took me a while. It wasn't like 9/11 where it happened in my backyard, where, you know, we could see smoke on the horizon. It was very far removed for me too. It's almost like the siege at Waco. It was just another event in the news. It just so happened that at that time I was in journalism, so I was dealing with it on a much more intense level than I might otherwise would have been. So, anyway, my apology aside, I think this episode does an amazing job of crystallizing everything that we're stumbling around and trying to say in that exchange between Magic and Jen.
It doesn't matter whether it's 1967, 92, or even today. The sparks of injustice may vary, but systemic oppression will always light the fuse. And no matter how much progress we make, it seems like that will never change.
That right there is like, you know, that's like 101, right? It doesn't make a difference the place or the time. It's reacting to a situation that never seems to change. And we've experienced this since then. Since the LA riots, there have been more uprisings based on a system that still oppresses people. And Magic said, it doesn't matter. There will always be some spark somewhere as long as the injustice persists. That right there is such quintessential Quantum Leap. Like you could imagine Sam giving some kind of, like the Kirk speech.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's so much more appropriately done here and so much more effective here because we have a person who has lived through this and we have firsthand experience speaking the truth. And one of the things that Hughes and Raab told us that they were shocked about, Magic was talking about the Detroit riots in 1967 in that speech. It turns out Ernie Hudson was actually there. And they talk about it in the interview, right? Isn't that nuts? So it feels like Ernie had a lot of personal experience to bring to this too. He's already lived through stuff like this when he was a young man. It's now 50, 60 years later, and it's still going on.
And so good to see Ernie Hudson getting such great dialogue. We've been talking about this since day one on the show, that Ernie Hudson, fabulous actor, does tend to get a lot of headaches when time travel's discussed. And that's pretty much the character so far. So good. Yes, perhaps an obvious choice for giving across this speech. I mean, not necessarily an obvious choice, but taking the opportunity for having a person of colour in the cast of characters who is of the age that they could have been in Detroit in 1967. But wow, I'm so glad they did, because it really gave Ernie the chance to show off his acting chops in a way that we knew he had, but he hadn't had the chance to in the series so far. So I'm so pleased that Raab and Hughes did that, and that Hudson did such a great job with it.
And it's great, having that caliber of actor deliver something that he has personal experience with to bring the point home even more effectively. And this is not the first time I've heard this mentioned, but Jen said something to the effect of,
there wasn't anything you could do to fight back?
Hell no. Black kids have that talk before their parents will let them out of the house on their own.
Basically, how not to die at the hands of the police. How harrowing and disgusting is it that is just normalized now? Like, you have to know how to conduct yourself in a way, even though you're not doing anything wrong, even though it's just that the cards are stacked against you in a way that if you do get into a scrape, it could be potentially fatal. So just learn how to go along to get along. I don't know. I can't even imagine. I can't pretend to imagine. I want to stop here and just say that Albie had asked me to promote this because you're all familiar with the name. Anyway, you should be the name John Irons. He is a friend of mine. He has been on the podcast once last season, and he's been on the after show a couple of times. And he happens to be black. And he did the after show with Albie and Hayden on YouTube for this episode. And Albie says it's a must watch for anybody. So if you want to get the perspective of somebody who might be actually speaking from a place of experience instead of a place of bafflement and just like, all right, I hope we do this justice. I hope we don't say the wrong thing. I mean, because let's face it, Matt, that's what we're doing here. John can probably give you an insight that's much better than ours. So, after you're done listening to this, go to the YouTube channel and watch the after show. I know I can't wait to see it. I have a feeling that what John brings to this discussion is going to be a lot more valuable in this sense than what we bring to this discussion. So everybody go over there to youtube.com/the quantumleappodcast and just look for the after show for One Night in Koreatown. So you had mentioned Ernie Hudson getting some meaty dialogue now. Aside from the riot storyline, we also get to know more about magic here. And guess what, Matt? I was right. You had said, I don't know, you were hedging for some unknown reason, but we do have a Magic and Beth relationship here. And I think Albie created the nickname, the ship name, Meth, Magic and
Team
Beth.
Meth.
Team Meth. So that's what we're going to call them from now on. We have the Hockey Puck Handlink and Team Meth. So you're welcome, fan community. That's our second contribution to the new Quantum Leap.
I will just clarify, I'm not unhappy about this. I just didn't... It seemed to come out of nowhere. That was all. I'm not averse to Team Meth. I was just not on Team Meth.
Well, I think that it does come about organically. The way they describe it in the story with Ben being lost and Magic feeling lost. And I guess Beth is one of the few people who is in his circle that can understand exactly what he's going through, at least secondhand, because it's exactly what Al went through. And not only does it help Magic find some kind of center for all of this because he feels like he's failed his friend and Ben is now lost in time and it's his responsibility, but it also mirrors some of the stuff that Al went through in a negative way as well. And that's where the alcoholism comes in. And I flippantly said, wow, Beth sure has a type, huh? Alcoholic admirals. But maybe I shouldn't leave that in the podcast, but everybody was thinking it. Come on.
Yeah.
Just when you think you might have a bright spot in all of this, we get a Magic storyline where he seems to be at least in some kind of domestic bliss with a character that we love seeing coming back. It was great to see Susan. And then all of a sudden they just, in the middle of all this, drop the bombshell. It's just like, what is going on when she comes in with the bottle? Oh, man.
Yeah. Could they be putting Magic through any more strife in one episode? And yeah, it's so well introduced because, yeah, like you say, you see this domestic bliss. And when Susan walked onto the screen, I was elated to see her again. And I was quite prepared to come on mic with you and say, yes, Chris, you were right. Team meth, all fine and good. And it did all seem very real and natural and believable. And it was lovely. And then, yeah, she turns up at Project HQ and you sense there's something up. And then it just pivots on this moment in the office where she presents the bottle, and it, like, yeah, wow, was all I could say at the time. Such a fantastic scene for both of them. Once again, Susan Diol, great actress. We've seen her acting chops in the original series. Hasn't done that much in the new series until now. And seeing these two incredible performers up against each other, talking about a very tough and sensitive subject, it was great and just came out of nowhere. And I honestly thought during that scene, okay, we're going to have this scene here. Magic's going to say, maybe make up a lie about the bottle, and we'll move on. And we might hear about it again in another episode. I was really surprised it kept coming up. And I've been saying to people, because obviously we get these screeners in advance of the episodes airing, and you know we can't talk about them publicly, but I've been saying this episode is really surprising and not entirely like Black on White on Fire for reasons that I just cannot go into, and this is the reason. There's this whole subplot that is so personal to Magic and not something that could ever have been done in the original series because we didn't have this family back at the project that we ever saw on screen. So that's just a bit of an info dump of everything that I'm thinking right now in terms of this plot line and the way that it was presented and the way that it was weaved in through the whole episode, that just every time they returned to it, it consistently surprised me. I kept thinking, are they still talking about this? Is this still happening? I thought we wouldn't hear about this again until next week. Okay. All right, fine.
I feel like they were able to use that in good service to not just Magic, but to Ben as well. At first, when I first saw the episode, it came out of left field that not that Beth came with the bag and the empty and said, what's going on? Are you back on the sauce? But a couple of scenes later, they're in the shoe shop and the riots are happening and they're barricaded in, and Ben is talking to Magic, and then Magic just drops the fact.
Ben, I'm an alcoholic.
And I thought, well, that's just odd. Did they just want to have Ben know so that they could expand on this plot point or what? But then upon a couple of rewatches, because I think I watched this one 3 times, the way it ends, and to your point, the fact that he gets out of the accelerator and it's not like, yay, racism is solved forever and my alcoholism is now a distant memory. He gets out and he's still rattled. And he says to Beth, instead of an anniversary, can we go to a meeting? And I feel like the scene where he tells Ben just so out of the blue, it's almost like he's desperate to talk about it. It's almost like it's getting to him to the point where if he doesn't talk about it, something's going to break, as witnessed by him like reaching for the bottle on his sideboard in his office and then stopping himself. And it made much more sense upon subsequent viewings to me that he would just blurt it out seemingly non sequitur. And then the way Ben responds, I think, was a great way for us to see where Ben is at, because we've been seeing an evolution of Ben's character this season from indignance and despair to anger. And now he's sort of at this place where he's accepting the fact that he's leaping. And there's a great exchange between Magic and him in which Ben says,
"You didn't lose me, Magic. I made a choice to leap. And the consequences of that are my burden to bear, not yours."
And right there again, it's where this new season is doing things so much differently than the first season, because every turn I felt like on the first season seemed to be hinging on some new plot point where they're weaving in so much character stuff and so much emotional stuff in the course of the leaps now, where, okay, we also got to check in to see where Ben's at now, because he's our protagonist. And even though he was just involved in a lot of leap stuff, and this was very much a very special episode about Magic, right? It was like the after school special about Magic. But we at least get to see that Ben is also in a slightly different place than he was last episode. Because last time we saw Ben, before he leaped into the shoe shop and, the riots sidetracked him, he just walked away from Addison. Like literally turned his back on her and walked away as he was leaping. So that is like as pivotal a moment, I think, for him as finding out that she was with somebody else because she thought he was dead. But we don't really address it because we get so into this episode and so much into the magic stuff that I guess it's my disconnect there is that it feels like we've been following Ben very closely throughout the course of these leaps and seeing where he's at with each one and how he's growing and changing and adapting. And this is the first time I think that we've stepped back from that a little bit to the benefit, because now that we've established the new paradigm, we can maybe expand out on some of the other stuff. So I was just happy to see them acknowledge it in some way. And I think this is a signal that Ben has maybe begun to move on.
Yeah, and rightly so, in as much as I think it's become very clear that this season does not have the mystery box that the last season did. The story arc is about the people, and people change, and it can't be like we had last season, just one thing building up and building up and building up. We couldn't have had a season of Ben somehow just increasingly reacting to Addison's presence. So this feels the time for him to have moved on. And yeah, you're right. The way that's come about in this episode is really well handled.
Yeah, I think it's so organic. It's not like a declaration. I feel like it's Ben responding to his friend in a way that makes his friend feel better, but also lets us as the audience know that he's also in maybe not a better place, but I think in a more positive place. And I guess we have Neil to thank for that from the last episode. So the shadow of Tim Matheson looms large. So he's now going to become the patron saint of the new Quantum Leap. Thank you, Tim Matheson. All hail Tim Matheson. So yeah, it was nice to get some of those smaller character moments. And I felt like the episode did a very good job of building individual characters for the Leap as well, who you got to care about. Tim Matheson's episode stood out for just his character being like larger than life and such a presence. Whenever he was on screen, he took over. Whereas in this episode, it was much more like a traditional Leap, but I felt like every character was developed fairly well. And I love the fact that they had the character of Dwayne, and you saw some of the peril that that poor kid was facing. And again, just the fact of him being alone on the streets, Magic says,
Ben, you have to go after him.
Is that what Ziggy's saying?
I don't need an AI to tell me that if cops catch Dwayne, there's a 100% chance he won't survive.
Deric Hughes, who we speak to later, was a fan of the original series. And I swear to God, this is one of the first or second times that they actually used the hologram the way they used it in the original series. Because Ben is running around with his brother on the Leap looking for the kid. And then Magic pops in and he says,
"Found him. Around the corner, 1 block over."
Yes. Yeah.
And it's we can actually use the hologram to locate somebody like we used to, and just looking at Addison saying, I don't know where it is. Yeah. It's like, do we know how holograms work in this show? I mean,
no going back now, though. They're not going to be able to get away without having the hologram locating people in future episodes. That door has now been opened.
Right? And I welcome it because I feel like it was almost like a dramatic crutch to not be able to locate something when you have basically a team in the future that can find anything anywhere as long as there's a record of it. Yeah. So, I mean, I hope that they don't backpedal on that aspect of it, because it felt akin to the old Quantum to the point where I didn't notice it until I noticed it. And then I realized I noticed it because I had missed it so much.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah. That's clear as mud, right?
No, I get you.
The only thing missing from this episode, if I had to criticize it, it was just basically one set and that same freaking alley. How many times have we seen that alley now?
Oh, that alley.
That freaking alley. We saw it from the pilot on. I feel like that alley is actually the patron saint of... Actually, Tim Matheson lives in that alley.
Probably.
Yeah.
The set decorators do a fantastic job of making the same parts of Universal look different each week, era appropriate. The problem is an alley in the 1960s and an alley in the 1990s and an alley in the 21st century all look pretty much the same, so it's really hard to hide the fact that it's the same fricking alley.
When they're taking they were taking the garbage out in the daytime, and the brother Sonny was telling Ben, when are you going to tell Dad that you enlisted in the Marines? And I'm looking behind them, I'm saying, isn't that the pawn shop from the Bounty Hunter episode? I think it is, yeah. Or, isn't that the dumpster from the Indian restaurant episode? I think it is.
Yeah, I think unless they start doing a lot of location filming, which they're not going to start switching to location filming at this stage, but unless they do that, I think we're going to have to get used to a lot of backlot redressed.
I think what might have helped that, and I guess maybe the second part of that observation that I was trying to make, not only are we seeing a lot of the samey types of sets because it's the one alley, but in the Legacy series, there would have been some kind of stock footage incorporated, and there would have been maybe a voiceover by Sam explaining the time and giving some context to the viewer. And I feel like even though we kind of make fun of that sometimes when we're talking about the classic series, it gives it a sense of place, and it gives it a sense of history, and it grounds it actually being there. And I think this episode lacked that. Now, I don't know if it's just a question of time, because a lot of the time we make fun of that stuff in the original series. It's like, oh, I guess they didn't have enough. They just needed some filler, especially in the wrong stuff, when there was about 45 minutes of rocket footage and 3 minutes of monkey footage, you know? But I feel like this is the opposite extreme. Like, this episode needed some kind of, I think, actual footage to maybe tie the two together. Did you miss that?
I liked it for the fact that we were seeing everything happening from the point of view of one family, and I don't know. I picture things like black and white on fire and it cutting away to some grainy film footage of people rioting, and I don't know if that would have worked here, because I honestly think it would have made the story bigger in a way that wouldn't have serviced the plot that well.
And I think the opposite. I think it would have made the stakes for this individual family seem a little bit more perilous than a random crowd scene banging on the windows and then them hiding in the stock room with almost no extras pouring into the store or anything like that. It was all what you didn't see, because you were so focused on following that family without giving, if you're a kid watching this and you don't know what that time was like, they don't give you any sort of visual context to say, oh my God, look how big this was. Look how violent this was.
Yeah.
Look how all encompassing this was, and look how it took over the city. I think we were missing that. And I think part of it could be time, because they used to have like 47, 48 minutes. Now they got the 41. Are you going to spend any of that on just stock footage? And I think it's also because the old show was shot on film. This is now, everything's digital. The juxtaposition of the two mediums is going to be even more jarring than it was back in the 90s. So yeah. I don't know if that's a part of the reason, like creatively, they decide not to do that, because I can't think of much, if any, stock footage we've seen in this new show. Can you?
No. I'm just thinking back. No, I don't think there's been any stock footage. A lot of those kind of establishing shots, they've been able to do either completely in CG or heavily CG bolstered. For example, like the establishing shots in the pilot. Back in the original series, we would have seen some of the Philadelphia skyline, and actually there is a shot of the Philadelphia skyline. So maybe the pilot isn't the best example. I think that's one of the rare times where they actually have used some stock footage. But for the most part, when Ben first leaps in and we see Philadelphia, it's a shot of Vancouver that's been heavily done up with CG to add bits around the outside of it to make it look a bit more like where it's meant to be, and to take out all the modern stuff. So they've got all these tools now that mean they don't have to rely on stock footage. I'm also thinking fellow travelers. There's a couple of nighttime sequences showing streets at night, and the picture quality drops a bit. So that is most likely, in fact, the picture quality drops a lot, to your point about film footage. So that is almost definitely stock. And somebody up there likes Ben. There is a shot of traffic footage, and it's taken from Knight Rider, and you can see Kit just edging onto the screen just as it cuts out.
Really?
So, yeah. So I think actually traffic footage that may be where we have seen a few elements of stock, because that's, I guess, a bit harder to go out and film some traffic and then digitally delete every single car and digitally add a whole load of cars in. I feel fairly certain there's some in A Decent Proposal as well. So, yeah, some, but nowhere near what they had to do in the original series, because there was no way of wiping out buildings and things like that, which buildings they can tweak now.
Or palm trees.
Yeah, I mean, they've taken out so many of those, which they never used to in the original series. So, yeah, the tools now make it almost a little redundant using stock footage.
I just hope that they build another alley set on the back lot. Just
Yes.
a second one, just to give us a little bit of variety.
Yeah.
And now that we've taught you to see it, folks, you're never going to unsee it. We're sorry, and you're
Sorry.
welcome. Yeah, that suspension of disbelief will come crashing down every single time you see them in the alley now. So, aside from Magic and Beth getting together, there wasn't a heck of a lot of new Quantum Leap lore introduced in this, maybe because we spent so little time back at the project, and when we were back at the project, it was more character stuff than, quote, Leap stuff. So, if we can just talk about the project stuff a little bit, I really enjoyed the scene where they were prepping Magic to go into the imaging chamber.
I know the drill.
What about the hand link? It's a lot harder to operate than a smartphone.
Well, it's a good thing I've seen Addison do it 1,000,000 times.
I just don't want you to get rattled.
Jen, I'm a former Navy SEAL. I don't rap.
That was a perfect scene. I love that scene.
Yeah.
Just the look on Ian and Jen's faces when Magic was going in. Did they look like kids on Christmas morning somehow?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're building on the family vibe there so nicely. The only thing that is still bothering me slightly this season is lack of material for Jen. We're 5 episodes in, and I think the best work she's done so far is in this episode, just being there as a scene partner for Magic. I'm waiting for some good Jen stuff to come up.
We did get a nice Addison bit, though, and I feel like we often focus on Ian when they're on screen. They just give Mason a lot to do, I think, because they kill it every time. But I like the fact that they took a back seat to Addison's story this week. It was that scene in the gym where she was working out. For once, it was Mason on screen, but it wasn't all about Ian.
Yes.
Because it tends to be all about Ian. So it was neat to see them take more of a supportive role as well. And maybe that's coming from this place of being estranged again from Rachel. Maybe they're trying to learn how to listen, and maybe I'm bringing more to it than there should be, but I just see all this connective tissue where I hadn't seen it in the previous season. Emotional tissue, anyway.
Yeah.
So it was another subtle way for them to show you where the character is at based on what we've seen so far this season. And the fact that Ian was able to sit and listen to what Addison had to say without interjecting a snark or a quip or whatever. Maybe they're learning from the mistakes that they made with Rachel to just be more present and to not try to railroad a situation or save somebody or tell them what they think that they should do. So, again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but hey, it's fun this way.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. If we didn't read a lot of stuff into it, there'd be no podcast.
And yeah, maybe I'm reading too much into it because we had just spoken to the writers and they had sort of discussed where this episode falls in the episode order and how it kind of shapes in a good way how they can approach the material. And I'll just leave it at that. They explain it a lot better than I can here, and I don't want to encapsulate it and ruin it. I want to entice you to listen to it because it was a fun interview. So again, after the break. Yeah, I don't know about sneaker culture. Do you?
Oh, no, not at all. No idea.
Do you have like a vast closet full of Air Jordans and things?
Not at all. My goodness. No. Didn't even have any name brands until a few years back.
Yeah, I mean, I had Converse high tops.
Ooh, fancy.
I don't think I've ever spent more than $100 on a pair of sneakers. And for me, that's extravagant. That's like, what, 100? Oh my God. I think now.
It's shoes. Why would people spend money on? But people do.
10 years from now, sneaker culture is going to be huge.
This is where the new Quantum Leap and I part ways in many instances. These current culture references that as an old dude, or like they've passed me by. I think I've mentioned this before, but I work with a lot of like young women. They're all like in their late teens, early 20s. It's just a byproduct of being in the medical field, just like a lot of the reception and a lot of like the nurses' aides and things like that. You deal with them on a day-to-day basis, and they're also young. And I talk to them, I'm friendly with them, but half the time I have no idea what they're freaking talking about. And it's just like, I am old. And I say things to them and they look at me like I have 6 heads, like, what the hell are you on about? And I'm like, this is just common knowledge. What do you mean you've never heard of Dire Straits? And they're like, Dire, what now? I said, money for nothing, you know? And they're like, no.
They're busy talking about Turtle Time.
Right, they're talking about Turtle Time. And I'm just thinking like, all right. I mean, I really didn't know sneakers were that big a deal, but apparently it's a huge collector's market out there, and it's just another way for me to feel old instead of young. When I watch the old Quantum Leap, I'm just like, that's ancient history. That's before my time. Now I'm just like, oh my God, now I'm ancient history. Now I'm before its time.
Well, you and me both.
Well, I mean, when they do an episode about collecting books or radios, I'm going to be right there, man. It's going to be right in my wheelhouse.
I hope you're hired on as a consultant.
You don't want me as a consultant. I'm actually everything. I'll just bring everything to a screeching halt. I did know the song, though. I knew the needle drop, which is uncommon for me, especially in the 2000s. But who doesn't know Belle Biv DeVoe? Even you know Belle Biv DeVoe.
I didn't spot a needle drop. When was this?
It was right as he leapt in. They were playing Poison.
See, I'm always too busy when he leaps in. I'm always too busy, like, go, oh, what is he? Where is he? What's going on? Who's that? I don't always notice the music.
All right.
I know, it's terrible. This is why I have to watch the episodes. Like, I've usually watched them 2 or 3 times before we get on mic, and then about another half dozen times before I actually start writing about them. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I show up for these recordings poorly researched.
No, that's not true. Again, it's the Venn diagram is becoming increasingly narrower for our shared experiences and the experiences of the new Quantum Leap. That 3-way intersection is becoming microscopic, I feel like, on some episodes. So it's not going to deter me from enjoying it. And I'm learning something. I know now sneakers are a big deal, and I shouldn't have thrown out all those Converse I had when I was a kid. So,
no.
Are those collectible? High tops are collectible, right? The Chuck Taylors? I'm going to pretend they are.
Chuck Taylors? What's a Chuck Taylor?
High top Converse, like canvas Converse. They're like a classic shoe.
Yeah, no, I know of Converse. I mean, I hadn't heard of Converse until David Tennant started wearing them in Doctor Who.
Perfect, yeah. There you go.
And that was my connection to them, and then I discovered people collected them, and I was like, "What? That's a shoe. Why do you collect shoes?" But again, I don't judge. I collect weirder stuff.
I'm sure if you came across one of those red swoop Nikes that Marty wore in Back to the Future, you'd grab a pair of those. I know I'm still looking for a pair of those.
Yeah, to be fair, I do own one pair of sneakers that did cost me over 100, probably significantly over 100. It was a few years back now. And it is, I can't even remember the brand now. I want to say Nike. It's the sneakers that Kyle Reese wore in the first Terminator film. And
oh my God.
Which is, it's a genuine pair of sneakers. And whoever it was, I want to say Nike brought them out again about 10 years back, as a limited edition. And I jumped on them just in case I ever did a Kyle Reese cosplay. I've never got around to getting a homeless man's trousers covered in paint to finish off the cosplay. But one of these days, I will show up to a convention looking like I've mugged a homeless man.
Listen, I know that you like to get those pictures with the celebs. So
Yes.
Next time Linda Hamilton is making an appearance, a photo appearance, that's going to be your catalyst. You're going to have to get those pants. And
Yes.
you will show up and you will say, and he will not stop ever until you are dead.
Yeah. And then I'll say, look at the shoes. Look at the shoes. Yeah, they're a nice pair of shoes. I've never put them on my feet. Well, no, I put them on once just to check that they were the right size, and they've been gathering dust ever since. I'm so sorry to cosplayers out there.
I just love that you call them trainers. We're so alike, but we're so different.
I've just checked. They are indeed Nike trainers, yes.
Okay. All right. That's sneakers to you and me, Americans. Yeah. Just like sweaters are jumpers.
Oh, yeah.
Or jumpers are sweaters.
I get confused by that. Let's call the whole thing off.
Do we have anything more to say about One Night in Koreatown?
I mean, given the fact that I've just spent 5 minutes talking about Kyle Reese's sneakers, I'm thinking we've probably run out of stuff to say.
I don't know how that doesn't speak directly to the LA riots, is what I'm saying.
Well, very true.
You're right there. How about this? How about we do some final thoughts on One Night in Koreatown?
Yes, such a good episode, and so evocative of the original series when it was doing one of its real issue-led episodes. Yes, all right, I was wrong at the start to try and say you can't compare this to Black and White on Fire. Of course, you can't not compare this to Black and White on Fire. But I do stand by the fact that the magic storyline and the fact that you didn't see what was going on outside the store means that this takes as different a route as possible to the original episode and succeeds in completely different ways, but succeeds extremely well. Really, really outstanding episode.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. This, to me, has all of the feeling and gravitas of classic Quantum Leap. It's an issues episode that brings a real human story to the issue and highlights it for everybody that's watching. And I think it tells it from multiple points of view in a very effective way, in a very sometimes chilling and arresting way. And I'm really glad that we got to see more for Ernie Hudson to do, and we got more out of Magic's character. I just hope that they carry that on as they go forward. And I hope that we're able to weave more storylines into further episodes that deal with Jen, that deal with Ian, that deal with Addison. I mean, we haven't seen Addison outside of the fact that she's dating Tom now and that Ben told her to go away. We don't really know where she's at emotionally at the moment. She seems to be taking everything in stride and just, doing what needs to be done for the team. But I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of shit going on with her. So I hope we get to see that. But that's besides the point. I'm just saying this episode sort of laid more of the groundwork to be able to do that kind of thing and to do it effectively. And I hope we get to see more of it as the leaps go on. But really terrific episode of Quantum Leap, old series or new. I'd highly recommend it. And I think that ends our discussion of One Night in Koreatown. But stay tuned because there's plenty more to come. After the break, we will bring you our interview with Benjamin Raab and Deric A. Hughes. Stay tuned.
The QLP is brought to you by listeners like you. Please go to patreon.com/quantumleappodcast and give as much as you can. For as little as $1 a month, you can be a contributor to the Quantum Leap podcast. It goes to covering our server cost and helps keep the podcast going. Thank you.
Are you a fan of the Apple TV show For All Mankind? Then you'll love Moon Show, a For All Mankind podcast, which you can find on the Infinite Potato Alliance podcast network. I'm your host, Neek Yeager, and each week I discuss successive episodes of For All Mankind with a rotating panel of guests. Join us and catch up on seasons 1 through 3 before season 4 premieres in November. Moon Show, a For All Mankind podcast.
Moon Show, you are go for launch.
Hi, this is Ernie Hudson, and you're listening to the Quantum Leap podcast.
That girl is poison. Come on, Matt. You didn't notice that as it came in? It was just like dunk, 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 dunk. There was even like a little cat waving his paw in time to the song. And
that was probably what distracted me.
I only harp on it because it's one of the few songs I recognize from the era. So it makes me feel less old.
I got to check it out.
Check it out. Well, I mean, I think that we have much more to check out than that. Everybody knows that song but you, apparently. So, yeah, okay. All right. I'm sorry. No more Belle Biv DeVoe, and I hope I don't have to pay them royalties for my startling rendition. It was just like, it was arresting, right?
Wait, that was you? I thought you just dropped in an extract.
You didn't know it was me because it didn't sound like Elvis Presley. Anyway, we did speak to Hughes and Raab, Benjamin Raab and Deric A. Hughes. And just to set the scene, I knew that we were in good hands because when Deric came on camera, he was wearing a handling t-shirt that seemed custom designed. I don't think I've ever seen that handling t-shirt anywhere. And he's got an iPhone case that's shaped like a handling, a gummy bear handling, not a hockey puck handling. So we knew that right there that we were talking to an old school fan. So hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as we did. Here is our interview with Benjamin Raab and Deric A. Hughes.
Hey, this is Matt and Chris at the Quantum Leap podcast, and we've got a really special feature for you today. We have not one, but two co-executive producers from Quantum Leap with us. We've got Benjamin Raab and Deric A. Hughes. Benjamin, Deric, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So this is the first time we've had you on the show. You've obviously been with the series since the start. We have so much to catch up on. I know obviously we really want to spend some time talking about this week's episode. But I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't just have a very quick look back at how things have been over the last year. So can I just start by asking you how you got involved in the show? And what kind of previous knowledge you had of Quantum Leap when you joined the series?
We came to the show right around the time, obviously before it was starting up. Deric and I obviously know about the show from growing up. Deric was more of a viewer of it than I was. I was in college when the show came out, so I really wasn't watching TV a lot. Only caught sporadic episodes here and there, but I know Deric was a big devotee of it. And we had just finished working on our previous show, a CW show called Legacies. And we're kind of looking forward to some downtime, looking forward to some quiet time. We've been working really hard through the pandemic and everything. And, Deric had put in a call to our agents hearing that, this new Quantum Leap series is happening and they may be staffing. So, they put the feelers out. They sent out a sample of ours, and we were able to get a meeting with the co-creators, Stephen Lillian and Brian Winbrand. And obviously Martin Giro, his production company read our material, and we had a meeting. And that's how it began. And Deric, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, we, well, let me preface by, I was excited about it. And Ben.
It's not that I wasn't excited. I was just looking forward to a little break. That's all.
Yeah, but you didn't, like you said, you didn't watch the show. You didn't watch the original series.
I wasn't a diehard. I was not a diehard.
I knew all about the series, and so I was very much very curious. I wasn't so much excited, but then read the pilot script and was like, we definitely should take a meeting. And so we met with Brian and Steven, who are also a writing team. We just hit it off because it was I think it was one of our first times that we ever had a meeting with a writing team and for a show that was running a show. So it was we had so many just similarities, and we were just really, just, simpatico in that way of we were we walked away from it was what, even though we said to ourselves that we were going to take some time off and just work on our own things, I was we'd be remiss to, not leap at this opportunity. And then they felt the same way. And we got the offer to come aboard and join the show. And so we were right there from the very beginning after they had already greenlit the pilot that was shot, that was originally shot, that eventually became another episode, because then what happened was that the studios network decided that that wasn't the right way to launch the first season of this show, and they wanted to give everyone a chance to try to figure out another way to do it. And that included it was the original pilot was shot up in Vancouver. And so we were, told hey, actually everything's going to be shot down here in LA. And so that was another reason why we were excited about working on a show, because this will be our first show that we've ever had a chance to work on a show that's shot here in LA. And so it changes everything, when it's in your backyard, literally less than 15 minutes away from where we live, it's, you're on the lot. That makes a big difference versus traveling, the air travel, hotel, and just being someplace else all the time for whenever you're working on your episodes. So we, it just all sort of came together, and we're very excited. And so coming on board and working with the rest of the staff, then it was just go from season 1 all the way up until now. Actually, I mean, there was a little bit of downtime. Going. We're still going. Yeah, we're still going. There's a little downtime for about a good 5 months, but that was for a whole another reason.
I'm really curious, just kind of looking through your journey since that point up to today. I may be putting words into your mouth, so tell me if I've got this wrong, but you wrote Salvation or Bust. Neither of you are around during the Old West. You wrote a medical drama. I don't believe either of you have personal medical backgrounds. And then we have One Night in Koreatown, which appears to be a more personal story. It's something set in Los Angeles. Is this episode this week something that is more relatable for you? And if so, why did that come after 2 episodes that are maybe pushing the bounds of creativity for you both?
Well, to give you a little context for the different episodes that we have written. So Salvation or Bust, came about right after Brian and Steven, left and Martin, took over in earnest, and he really wanted to do a Western. And ironically, the spec script that everyone read that got us this job was a Western. So it kind of, it sort of all fell into place for us there. While we were on set making that episode, the room was breaking episode 10, and we were, we're just working on shooting Salvation or Bust. And then on the last day, Martin was like, hey, we've got, this episode broken. You guys did such a good job with this one. Would you be willing to write the medical one? And we're like, okay, well, neither of us have any expertise in that arena. And, other than having watched numerous episodes of ER, or Grey's Anatomy, and he's like, but I think you guys are going to crush it. And we're like, well, okay, now our job is to crush it. So, we always look at any story we're given as a challenge. And if it's something, whether it's in our wheelhouse or outside of it, we always look to push ourselves to another plateau of our ability. Sometimes our reach exceeds our grasp. Sometimes we manage to, stick the landing. And I think with that episode, I think I can speak for both of us. I think we're particularly proud of it because, the room did an awesome job of breaking that story and giving us most of the raw material we needed to sort of fine tune things here and there. But when we sat down to actually write it, it's funny how you realize the things you have inside you that you didn't know were there. That, yes, I have no medical experience whatsoever, and which is why we tried to keep the schmiance to a minimum, and really sort of focus on the characters and the emotions, which is what this show does so well, which is what the original did, which is what we are the inheritors of that legacy, and we tried to carry that forward. With One Night in Koreatown, that's something that there is a much more personal side to it, and it starts with Ray, because he's the one that really wanted to do a story set in this time period. And he said it throughout in season 1. And so when season 2 came around, Deric remembered he'd said that when it came time to pitch out ideas at the beginning of the season, what do you guys want to do? This was like, okay, we would love to do this one. And, thankfully Martin and Dean said yes.
I have to think Deric, as a huge fan of the original, one of the touchstones for me of the Legacy series is Black on White on Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but think of that when I'm watching One Night in Koreatown. Was that an inspiration for you when it came to how you wanted to approach this episode?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was an inspiration, and all credit goes to Deborah Pratt. That was her episode, and it's a very important episode in Quantum Leap lore. But it was interesting because in that case, it was like Sam leaps into the body of a person that's a black man, right? And so it's we already walked in those shoes in that story. And it was like, again, having Ray be the star of your show, and being Korean American, having the experiences that Ray has had, living in LA, being at that time. And I have a lot of friends who also experienced that. It was, being half Asian. It was very important for us to want to have the Asian Americans POV centered in this story. And also the other thing is, you don't want to just do what has already been done. Right. And so that with the LA Watt story, in this case of this with the LA uprisings, it was an opportunity to basically say, okay, how that was done versus what we want to do here, and make it completely different, but also still be relatable. And that was our focus.
So, I mean, just to follow up, were there any special considerations that you took into when you were trying to figure out the points of view? I mean, for it to be set in Koreatown, what kind of research did you have to do? And I'm just curious to know, like, how you got the characters you got, because you had a fairly wide representation of different types of people. Mm-hmm. And it was also a story that was very adept at dovetailing into Magic's backstory, which was a nice way to bring the project side into it all. So, yeah. I mean, you had a lot of moving parts that you were thinking of, and I feel like at the heart of it, aside from Ernie and Raymond, was C.S. Lee.
Oh, C.S. Lee was fantastic. Great. He was great. And he was very excited to embrace this role, and also bring his own experiences and knowledge. And breathe that character into life. And it was very, it was like everybody that came in and that, was played, from Danny Kane to Benji Flores to Annalisa, they were all fantastic, and they brought something, unique and a great POV to those characters in a way that, when you're on the page, you're hoping that it's all going to work, because it's a balancing act, right? Because you have to tell the story that is what the episode's about, but then what's it really about? And then on top of that, still service what Quantum Leap is about. And then, so it's very much when we're putting it all together, saying like, okay, what's going on here? How does this tie in, especially with Magic, and then when you're writing for Ernie Hudson, again, Ben and I, we can't sing his praises enough, and just also be very excited because we're big fans of his, to get a chance to write for him. You want to make sure you want to write something, fun and exciting for him. And it was a great opportunity for, to explore Magic a bit more too. So it was, there was a lot of that. And, but early on, we were just like, okay, let's just make sure that we get this story straight. So there was research. There was also talking to, again, like I have a lot of friends that were there. I was not there at the time. I was actually stationed in the military. I was elsewhere, but I was watching it all unfold. And with my fellow Marines, we were all watching it and wondering, like, how is this going to affect, and if it's going to spread in the way that, could possibly. You start hearing rumblings, and also to the point where they had to put us down on lockdown in the base because they were worried that there might be sort of uprising at the base and stuff like that. So, then it's just in general of just being in Los Angeles, and, also our fantastic director, Tamika Miller, who also was able to bring her unique POV and perspective into this, and breathe life into it in a way that just makes it, our whole intent was just to try to make this authentic as possible in the given amount of time that we were able to do this episode.
I feel like you pulled it off, if that's any consolation to you.
Thank you. No, thank you.
We've touched a couple of times on Magic and Ernie Hudson, and I'd love to delve into that a bit more, because I think it's fair to say one of the views that we've had on the podcast ever since day one is you've got a fantastic actor there in Ernie Hudson, who is bringing a lot of gravitas to the role, but not doing much apart from asking other characters to explain things. And in this episode, we get this double whammy that we're discovering this new side to him, and this weakness that he has, and that whole plot line that's going to go on, and also his his experience with the race riots. And I'm interested in how that came up in the writers' room and how that came up when you were breaking the season. Was there a plan to have him have a battle with alcoholism that was going to come up at some point, and it just happened that this was the right spot? Or was it that your episode was being written and you realized, hey, actually there's some things that this could be bringing up, and then the alcoholism came afterwards?
I mean, it was a little bit of both. Yes to sort of both of those answers. Like questions. We knew we were going to, because we had a 3-year time gap, we had to fill it with the lives of what these people went through. And, Addison's was very clear from, as of episode 2, right? Magic's was, I forget when it came about, but yes, knowing that he was going to be the one going into the imaging chamber, being hologram for an episode, we jumped on that. We're like, okay, this is the perfect chance to sort of dig into it and show the repercussions of those 3 years on this particular character. Being able to tie it into Magic's backstory, during his early days in the military, before Sam ever leapt into him, and, finding that sweet spot window where we're like, oh, the math kind of works out that he might have been around Detroit at that time. And in a freaky twist of fate that neither Deric nor I were aware of, is that Ernie Hudson was actually in Detroit that summer. So he had personal firsthand life experience with it that was news to us after we had written those scenes, which was, I mean, it was just like mind blowing. And it brought another level of personal for him that we were, unaware of him as a human being, as opposed to just the character. So yeah, it was a weird serendipity that it worked out for us that this episode became the crux point for Magic and the revelation of that, of those 3 years, what he was going through, as well as, being able to say, oh, this is the episode where we reveal it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's a storyline. And again, I'm not going to spoil where things go, but it is a storyline that our goal with it, as with all things on the show, is to sort of present the positive side of things, right? To show that the hopeful, optimistic side of things. And, the way Ernie did his arc in this episode, the way he, performed it for us, it was beautiful.
I must say, I'm really glad. I was glad watching the episode, and I'm really pleased with the tease that you've given there that maybe this isn't going to go away. I was personally very worried when he stepped out of the imaging chamber at the end that he was going to be saying, I've exercised my personal demons. Everything is fine. And that moment where he steps into the elevator and makes the call is just, it's so beautiful and so true. I won't try and pull any more out of you though, because it sounds like you've already teased a little bit that this is going to come back. I do want to ask one, maybe.
Well, I mean, listen, part of that last moment though is to honor the truth about what people who struggle with addictions deal with, is that it's something that they live with. And so, it would have been dishonest to be like, I'm good now. Yeah. No, of course not. He's still struggling, and it's a process he's got to work through.
There's no magic button for magic. It's it really is. And that's also, again, when you come to the authenticity of something like that, especially when you're talking about a topic such as that, you really want to make sure that you are respecting it, and also the people that are, like as Ben said, that have been impacted, whether or not it's them personally or people in their lives. And so you never want to make it just like, okay, in 42 minutes we solved that. Yeah. Good job. And then also in the greater context of this episode, again, that's something else. It was like we never wanted to make it seem like that we're solving the issues that are being brought up, right? Yeah. It's like what we're doing is we're putting what what's wrong for this family, this character that Ben leaped into, absolutely, but that's not mean that we have solved the issues that made that incident happen in the first place, or what brought them together in the first place. So that was also very we were very cognizant of that as we were as just in general, whenever we're writing these episodes, the entire writer's room, everybody is always trying to gauge that to make sure that we get something that right.
I'm going to ask one more specific question about this topic before I let us move on, because this is something, and maybe something you don't want to answer or can't answer, but it's been bugging me since watching the episode the first time. Was Magic lying about finding an empty bottle at the back of the pantry?
That's for you to decide.
Yeah, I thought you might say that. Okay.
Who says it's empty? No, it was empty.
Well, I have to ask, since we're on Magic and we're on the support network that he's built up over the last couple of years since Ben has been gone, Deric, as a fan of the Legacy series, whose idea was it to ship Magic and Beth? And was it a special thrill to be able to write Susan back into the script and to bring so much connective tissue back to Sam and Al and the original Quantum?
So happy about that.
She's wonderful. And it was also, it just seemed like that's the way it was going to go. And it would be a disservice if we didn't actually try to do something with that, right? It was like we were dropping those hints in the first season, and it's like it was kind of there. So it was saying like, well, what else has happened in these people's lives over these last 3 years since Ben has been missing, right? And it was like, this seemed like the most obvious, like, yes, let's do this. Like, let's,
it started, I can tell you when it started, and I don't think we can take really credit for this.
No,
I feel like it was our writer assistant, Annalise, who wrote episode 116, which Deric and I oversaw the production of. But she's been shipping those two since like forever. And in her episode originally, if you remember when Magic shows up at Beth's house, there was, I think in the final edit of it, there was a little less than there was originally. There was a little bit more of a moment between the two of them than what ended up on screen. And that was sort of the genesis of, okay, this is where we're going to pick, at least we have some, like we had written something that like, we're not just pulling this out of our asses. Like it was based on something that we collectively decided, let's play that. And even if it didn't make it to air, it was bubbling in the background.
It was the fun moment when Janice like looks and said, "What's going on with you two?" It's like we were like, "Okay, that's the moment. Let's run with that." And it didn't get shot down. The idea was like, "All right, we're gonna keep going with this and see where this goes." So, when you see him buying the earrings, episode 2, you're just like, who are those earrings for? It's like, what's going on?
Yeah, and we've already said this in the main show, Matt. I told you so. I told you so.
Oh, yeah, I know. You were team meth from the start. I did not say that.
We've been calling them meth. That's the ship name for them.
And so a double whammy alongside Ernie Hudson, Susan Deal, such a great performer from the original series. And then last year we had her show up. She did some work, but we didn't see what she's capable of as a performer until this week's episode. And that was, some great stuff. So another great opportunity to see a good actor doing what they do.
Well, again, as someone who came to the original series later, and watched all of it to sort of get caught up to speed, having her, knowing that Al there was someone in Al's life that was so important to him, and that person is now in our world. That person is, just as much an appendage of the show, and I mean that in a positive way. I don't mean that in a negative way. That you want to see their story. You want to, they have a perspective on what we do. And because Al was their connection to the world of Quantum Leap, it gives us a different point of view than all of us who are fans of the team, fans of the place. She's got a very different outlook on Quantum Leap and the impact Quantum Leap has on someone's life, which I think is a nice realistic portrayal of, yes, it's great. We show up every week and right or wrong, but, lives are impacted by what this place is and what it does. And it's not always for the better. It's not so Pollyanna and rose colored glasses. I think it's a great way of mixing a little bit of gray into the black and white.
If I could maybe broaden out a little bit from this specific episode, I've noticed it was almost broadcast through the character of Neil that season 2 of the new Quantum Leap almost has a new mandate. We're going to be doing different kinds of leaps, telling bigger types of stories, different types of adventures. And I'm curious to know, I know that you guys had no hiatus between the end of season 1 and the beginning of season 2, but there is such a marked difference in the feel of the show. And okay, we can use the time jump to sort of explain that, but it just feels like a new show. I've said this is almost like the third iteration of Quantum Leap to me, because season 1 it was just such a different feel. Like, if you can speak to maybe broader topics, concerns going into season 2 of where you wanted the show to be and what you wanted to accomplish this season as opposed to last season. I don't know if you had a mandate in the writer's room, or I'm just so fascinated by the creative process because I just see so much more going on this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with, at the top, starts with the leaders. So, we have our showrunners, fantastic showrunners, Martin Garrow, Dean Jajaris. They are, they're the captains of the ship, right? And I think when you have them at the helm, right, it's sort of this idea of coming into season 2, we figured out most of the sort of the trouble spots, the things that work, that didn't work. And as we roll, and then, and having the opportunity, because we were able to do 18 episodes, it's like you can see the confidence in the storytelling, growing, so that by the time you get to the end of that season, everybody kind of knows what this show is. So then going into season 2, where we had a roadmap of like, okay, this is what we want to see and this is how we want to do it, we were able to just roll right into it. And so I think it was some more it wasn't so much as a mandate as it was like, okay, how do we top ourselves? How do we keep this going? And what works and what hasn't worked? And let's make sure that we keep doing the things that work more than things that don't. And it's still a trial by fire, because you just never quite know until it all comes together. Every episode is just sort of, because it's so, like you said, it's so different. And that's what makes the show so much fun. It's like every week is just it's a new treat. It's not, it's never the same sort of story in itself, other than the mission and the main character trying to, again, put right what's wrong and trying to find a way back home, and the team. But, it's like you have that shakeup that happens, right? That happens from after being 3 years later. So all the characters are kind of in very different places, and different starting points. And like, yeah, and you're right, Chris, it's very much sort of like almost like a third iteration of like starting again from the ground floor.
Well, and every season arc is different, right? Like, very much season 1, we were looking to really honor and homage the original show, like drawing on things like Leaper X and, the idea that, the memory forgetting, the Swiss cheese brain and all that stuff. Like, going into season 2, we did it. We told the story that we needed to tell that ended up with Ben where he ended up with at the end of the season, and set him on the path for the next season. So it's like you can't just keep going back and redoing what you did the first time. You got to kind of push in new directions. And I think, yeah, like Deric was saying, the time gap really helped with that. Knowing our characters and our actors better, we kind of have a better understanding of, what they all can bring to the table and what we can do with them, as characters. But the engine remains the same. And that's the thing. So it's like, when the things that you did, you're like, okay, well, that was cool, but maybe we don't need to do any more of that. That makes way for other things to sort of fill the space and put in things that it just goes deeper. It's just an opportunity to go deeper with things. And I think this year, I feel like with each episode, we've really had a lot more room and depth, and we've introduced new elements, right? Which I won't talk more about, but yes.
It's okay. We all know Tom's the bad guy. We all know.
I'm not saying anything about Tom. We actually haven't had a chance to be on set with Peter. 5 was he was not in that episode, so our paths have not crossed.
So we don't know.
He hasn't tried to kill either of us. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Good sign.
Yet.
Good sign.
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued, sort of on that topic, but maybe more broad. Obviously, season 2 went into production so early. You were filming this back in February. I can only assume you were writing it sometime before. With all that time that's passed and all the episodes of the end of season 1 that have aired since, do you spend a lot of time on social media seeing what the fan reaction is or listening to podcasts or anything? And, okay, have there been any surprises for you with the time that's passed in terms of these first 5 that have aired as a whole, what the response to them has been? Any particularly big surprises?
I mean, we're both on social media. We love to see what the fans have to say. Always curious, especially when people speculate and have theories is always fun. Never going to address them, so don't even ask. But it is interesting to sort of see what people react to. Obviously the big thing now is, the Ben Addison of it all. Like that's a huge thing, which, our show is part love story. So how they're feeling and responding to the love story means a lot to us to know that they are having a reaction, whether they love it or hate it. It's evoking a response, and that means they're engaged and interested, and that's great for us.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise, the delight is how much people are enjoying this season. I think that's it seems like that every week you're just seeing more people just really enjoying the season, and then also people going back and being able to discover the first season. And really, I think there was the relief of in the first season of like, okay, is this show working? Is this something that's worth turning, especially, winning over fans who were fans of the original series and having, questionable, having those doubts of if this show was just going to be another like sort of cash grab and just not, respecting what came before, if it was really worth tuning in. And then surprising everybody, it was like, oh no, this is a good show. This is a great cast, and I'm excited enough to keep watching it. And so we had, by shifting us to being at an earlier time on another day, also I think really sort of, gave more people a chance to check the show out. And now you have even, more fans joining the sort of circle of where they're really tuning in and having these discussions and stuff in a way that, didn't happen in the first season. So I think that's been a lot of fun and a nice surprise to see of like, and keep running into people like when I talk to them about the show and they're like, oh, I really like that show. Watch that show. Because you just never know in our line of work when you kind of mention the show, people are like, I don't watch TV. Or, it's like, I don't watch your kind of TV, so, but, 9 times out of 10, when I say, Quantum Leap, people are like, oh yeah, I know that show. I really like that. My family likes that. And that's really nice, because that's what at the end of the day, we want to write stories that are entertaining and for the fans, for people, not just for ourselves.
So one thing that struck me over the course of the last 5 episodes is we see a very definite arc for Ben, in the sense that we have the premiere episode, Matt and Iron Record, we think was spectacular because it was so different from the last season. It was just Ben by himself up to his own devices and solving the leap. And then we had the jaw-dropping reveal at the end. Then we had the other side at the project, and now things are coming back together. I'm really very curious about when you guys are in the writer's room breaking the season. You know that you have a certain number of episodes and that you want to hit certain goalposts for the characters. I guess all the characters have specific arcs. how do you determine what you're going to pepper in where? Because I felt like in this episode we saw Ben actually come to accept the fact that he made a choice that put him in this situation. At first, he was mad at Addison for not waiting, and then he was just angry at the world for the situation that he's in. And in this one, he tells Magic, I made my choice, and that's why I'm here. And it seems to me like we're seeing like a continual arc, continual growth. We've seen different stuff for Ian and Rachel in the last episode. Now we have some stuff for Magic. So when you guys are breaking the season, do you just have like broad ideas of where you want the characters to be or highlights that you want to hit? And then you sort of weave it into the leaps that you want to tell? Or how does that whole process work?
I mean, it starts with the episode order. When you know how many stories you're going to have to tell and figuring out the timing of things. Because our first 8 episodes lead, to a mid-season finale, like, okay, that right there is a big determinant on the structure of what those first 8 episodes are going to be. And obviously along the way, you figure out certain things, you kind of know the beginning and you probably know the end. And then the question is, what's going to be the middle that gets the character to that point at that end? Where our story fell, obviously, was, post a big turning point between him and Addison. And it's funny because, being that this is the second season in a row where we've written the 5th episode, which comes after some sort of romantic reveal between those, or a romantic change between those two characters, we've kind of gotten the sweet spot of like, cool. That means we don't have to talk about that particular story. We can sort of put the brakes on it, shift the focus to slightly other things, and do some wilder shit. But not that we don't want to. It's just, better minds sometimes are equipped to tell those stories than we are. And we're happy to let, those people tell those stories. But in this case, what was interesting to us from the Ben standpoint was, okay, what does life look like post Addison as hologram, right? Like he's already had to face the reality of, in the real world back home, life is without us together. So now here in this life that I'm living right now, from leap to leap, I'm on my own. I've got to start over. I've got to have a new beginning. And that bit of growth for him opens the door to where you'll see the next few episodes go. So it's really, it really depends. Like I said, that starting point of here are our numbers, then our numbers determine how creative we get with them and where things happen.
So we talked a little bit about the arc that is progressing up to the mid-season point. Are you guys starting now to look, with the writer's strike now over and the actor's strike hopefully coming towards some sort of conclusion? Are you as a team starting to look at what you might be filming next?
I will say that the day after the strike ended, we were back, pretty much practically back in the room, picking up right where we left off, because we had, when the strike first started, we were working on 6, 7, and 8 at that point in time. And so 8 was the last shooting those. So it was like 8 was the last episode that had a script that was ready to be shot and improved. And, it was, so we were able to get those 8 in. And then, at that point, those 8 are the ones that are airing currently right now. So we are now working on the next episode, a couple episodes, getting those ready, and we hit the ground running. So we're already trying to figure, we've been talking and figuring out like the rest of the season of what's going on. And like I said, fingers crossed that the actors, they've been out there every day. They were out there every day with us. When they came in, I think they came and joined us around day 80 of our strike, 80 something. Mm-hmm. And, so, like hopefully they get a great deal, and, maybe this will be a different story in a week from now, of where things are going. Cause it's very much a interesting sort of thing of coming back in, figuring these stories out. But the problem is you get to a certain point where you don't have actors. So what do you do, and how do you, it's like, so you have to sort of plan accordingly. But as the writers, we're just our goal and mission is to figure out the rest of the season, make sure that tracks. And so coming back into it, we were able again to sort of have that sort of unique opportunity to say, like, okay, those first 8 episodes that we did this season, these are things that we're working. This is stuff, but there's other things that we need to figure out, and we need to make sure that we figure out going forward. So like, without getting into it, without spoiling anything, there are definitely storylines that you have to sort of like lay out. But if they're not tracking, then, this is where you have to sort of like get it right before you start putting stuff out. So that's where we are right now. All the writers, we're just working. We're happy to be back at work. We're happy to, so happy to be just working on the show again. And hopefully everyone else will be able to come back, and then we'll be able to keep making fun stuff happening.
We all hope so. And I think I'm kind of going to ask the inverse of the question I asked earlier. This break, one of the things that it's afforded you is, I guess you're going in now to look at these episodes, which will hopefully make up the back half of the season, having seen how the first 4 or 5 episodes are responded to on social media. So is the fan reaction likely to have more of an impact than normal on those back episodes? Since I guess you'd normally have been going in planning out 13 up front.
Yeah. I mean, you can't just say, oh, the fans don't want us to do something, so we shouldn't do it. That's not, it's not really how it works. Like I said, it's something we always take into account, how people react to things. And if something were, egregious, maybe you course correct, but based on response. But we're, there's a certain logic to what flows from what you've set up, and you have to honor that story. And we, as a room, have done our diligence for these characters in the season, and knowing where we want it to go and how we want it to end. We've known that since we started talking about this season. So all we can hope for is that the fan reaction is positive, and in the places where it's negative, that's not something we can control. Like that's something, we respect it, and everyone certainly has the right to disagree with stuff. We hope they don't. When they love what we do, it's incredibly gratifying. We always want that. We're writers. We love positive feedback. Nobody likes negative feedback. But, at the same time, we exist as the writing staff in service of the show and the characters, and telling the best possible version of their adventures that we can.
Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's such a weird time to be a writer, because I think historically writers have written in a vacuum, in the sense that it was your show, you were in the room with your team and you did what you did, and maybe you got a letter or something, and now you can watch in real time as people react to your show, and maybe you're not even done with the season. And does it mess with your head in the sense that, well, we thought we had something good here. Do we have to pivot? Do we have to course correct or whatever? And maybe there's a little bit of that, but staying true to the vision. If I can say, anything about this season, it seems like, I guess that difference I was talking about, it's a much more character focused, emotionally honest show, I think, than the plot driven focus that we saw in the first season. And I feel like it's much more akin to the original series, honestly, this season than it was in the first season, because it was a different type of show. But I get it. I feel like the Leap and the project stuff is being much better balanced this season. And that being said, this is a long way for me to wind you up to. Now, Benjamin, you've seen the original series. You've gone back and watched it. Deric, you're a dyed-in-the-wool fan. Are there other elements or aspects of the Legacy series that you hope that you might be able to incorporate? Or if you had a wish come true? Besides Scott coming back, because, we know that's out of everybody's control. But are there any elements of the original that you feel like you would like to incorporate a little bit more?
Glowing heels.
We'll take them.
Yes!
Get Jean-Pierre on the phone.
Wow, that's a good reference. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. See, did my homework.
No, I mean, I think the Evil Leaper was the one that kind of scratched that itch for me, where it was just so much fun. I wish maybe we might have been able to do a little bit more, figuring some things out, but it kind of worked out the way it did. No, I think there's some other things that might, but I'm going to hold off right now that I can think of. Yeah, it's like I was like thinking. There's one thing I definitely want to do, but that will be for another conversation that's not yet ready. So let's go back to that.
You got it. I don't want you to pitch your ideas right here to us on.
Yeah. That's how I'll do it like that. Yeah. In the Magic 8-Ball, signs hazy, ask again later.
You got it. You got it. I know all the fans when they hear that there are fellow fans that are actually writing the show. You feel like it becomes like the snake eating its own tail, right? Do they call it Ouroboros?
Sure. Yes.
Right? So yeah, you got to know where to draw that line, and I was just getting a little geeky there.
Yeah, there'll be a moment some years from now where we'll all be watching TV, and all the fans will sit up and say, "That's what Deric meant." Keep an eye out for it. Ben, Deric, you've given us a fantastic insight into what's happening in season 2 and some really great teases for what might be coming up. Is there any final words you want to share with the listeners about One Night in Koreatown or the next few episodes that we've got to look forward to?
I mean, I'd just like to say thank you all for watching. It means so much to us to know that you guys care as much as you care about the show and these characters. And we always value your feedback, and we always want to hear from you, and love it or hate it. You're the fans, and we are all in this together.
Yeah, it's just so great that people have been enjoying the show and all, especially after all this time that when we've been putting all this work into it. From the cast to the crew, just incredible amount of work that was happening, because they had no breaks. They rolled right into season 2 to try to get ahead, and so that you have these 8 episodes. And to see it all pay off in this way. Like for us, One Night in Koreatown, we didn't get to see a cut of this until 3 weeks ago. And it was like we had to wait until the strike came to an end for us to be able to jump back in and see everything that we worked on. It's like, so it was a rediscovery. And so to see it all come together, it was just I think that I speak for Ben as well, that we're very proud of this episode. We're very proud and just very proud and happy and grateful to be working on this show in general. It's been such a great experience for us. And so we hope that it's been a great viewing experience for everyone else. And so just stay tuned and keep watching, because there's more to come.
Oh boy.
Well, yeah, you absolutely should be proud of this week's episode. And I think the fans are all grateful for these 8 and optimistic for more around the corner. So thank you so much for everything you've done and for your time today.
No, thank you guys. We had a lot of fun. This was great. We really appreciate you when you're reaching out. So thanks so much.
What a great couple of guys. I said at the top of the episode we should have had them on sooner, but hey, no time like the present, and they were so much fun to talk to. The one thing you didn't mention, Chris, as well, not only did Deric show up with the Handlink t-shirt and the Handlink phone case, they also had tremendous fun doing our show ID. So I was feeling slightly on edge because, it's a double interview, and these are a couple of guys that work well together. Would we be able to control things well? Would we be able to get a good interview out of them? And within 5 minutes of the recording starting, before the actual interview proper started, we were all in stitches as they repeatedly flubbed the ID, mostly on purpose, I've got to say.
Yeah. They should take their show on the road, is what we're saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was amazing to me how smooth they were speaking to every question that we asked and not speaking over one another. Like, I feel like they've done this before, you think?
Yes. Yeah. But they had a lot of really cool insights.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm glad that we were able to keep the talk mainly to this episode because there were so many questions I had. And it was great to hear about, like sort of broader concerns for the entire season and things like that. And it's kind of the same stuff or some of the same stuff that you guys talked to Christy about last week. And if you guys haven't listened to that interview, I highly, highly recommend that you go back to the Lonely Hearts Club and listen to our interview with Christy Lowry, who wrote the Lonely Hearts Club, because she speaks to some of those concerns that we talked to Deric and Benjamin about, sort of like the bigger picture stuff and how do you weave it all in. And it's nice to get a composite from different voices working in the room together, but approaching different episodes in different ways. And again, as I've said before, as a writer, all this stuff is like manna from heaven to me. It's just, it's so great to hear how they do it in the process. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun because, like you said, Matt, we were in stitches. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Deric.
Thank you.
Another great interview for the Quantum Leap podcast. Not so great. No new patrons to announce this episode. So, wah. So get busy out there, guys. Patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. That's where you can go to support us for as little as $1 a month. You can help us. Well, you heard Albie say it in the commercial before. Anyway, you know the deal. Patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. But despair not, Matt, because we do have some feedback.
Yay! That keeps me happy.
I'm very happy because I have a little ritual that I do most Saturdays. I've skipped the last couple of Saturdays because I've just had other stuff going on. But one of my favorite things to do is, especially if we get a new patron, I have to go over to the post office and mail them out their bookmark. And I was doing that this Saturday. That was just yesterday as we record this. And I went to our post office box, which I turn my key expectantly and I look in there and the same spider webs are in there. Maybe there's a new generation of spiders. They say, he graduated from college. Congratulations, Charlotte. Give him my best. I'll send a gift. But those cobwebs were cleared out this time, and we got an actual postcard. We got a postcard from a listener, a physical postcard in the P.O. box for the Quantum Leap podcast, which is a little thrill for me. We have this brief missive from our listener, Aaron L. Aaron writes, "Hi, Chris and Matt. Thanks for the great podcast. You're funny, insightful, and like hanging out with friends. Season 2 is off to an exciting start. I love the show, the cast, the stories. And I enjoy the after party with y'all. XOXO, Aaron L." And I believe Aaron's from Kentucky because this is a beautiful postcard with a shot of the Floral Clock State Capitol grounds in Frankfort. I guess the state capital of Kentucky is Frankfort. I learned something today. So
Nice.
Thank you, Aaron, for the postcard. You now join the exclusive club that includes just you and Nanrissa Lee for sending us feedback into the post office box. So you are on par with Nanrissa Lee. And I lie, we did get one generous supporter who sent us a check to the P.O. box as well at one point. So what are you guys waiting for out there? P.O. Box 542, Bayport, New York, 11705. You can join the exclusive ranks of Aaron L, Nanrissa L, and supporter X. I can't remember their name at this point, but I keep the P.O. box just for practical purposes. If we got to send stuff out or whatever, if something bounces back, it can come back to us. But I would love for more of you listeners out there to send us stuff. Give me a little thrill. All right. It's Saturday. I work all week. I go there. Something's in the P.O. box. My heart warms up. Like I just get like this, like it's Christmas morning. So don't you want me to have that feeling all the time, listeners? Matt, shouldn't they want me to have that feeling all the time?
Yes, we all want Chris to feel like that.
P.O. Box 542, Bayport, New York, 11705. Okay. We had an interesting Twitter exchange too, or can I call it that anymore?
An X exchange? I don't think that works.
An X exchange?
Oh.
Elon, you know not what you've wrought. This is so freaking confusing. Anyway,
I think that's the least of his concerns at this point.
Not as far as I'm concerned, damn it.
Yeah.
But we were talking last week about this bombshell notion, well, bombshell to me, that sacrifice is the engine of leaping. And it's something that Tom just casually throws out there as a, well, and you heard Christy last week saying that that's something that Dean just put in. It wasn't in her original script, so I don't know, maybe Dean has ideas, but it's given us ideas as well, because it's, to me, so much more akin to the bigger philosophical questions that were a hallmark of the classic series. And we heard from a tweeter named Larry Trujillo. And Matt, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. So Larry says, it's interesting that Fate's Wide Wheel and the Quantum Leap podcast both highlighted Tom's dialogue about sacrifice possibly being integral to leaping, yet neither mentioned that future Ian was able to make one highly targeted leap and return. Does that not negate Tom's theory?
That's an interesting question, because I have some thoughts about that. And before we get into my thoughts on that, your thoughts on that, Sam from Fate's Wide Wheel did respond, and I guess I'll read this one. Sam writes, I've been thinking about this, and it may be a leap, sorry, but Ian makes a sacrifice too. Their entire future and existence is likely wiped out by Ben's actions in the past. The minute they leaped, it was a kind of one-way ticket, if not the same as what Tom may have meant. That is very interesting. And then further on down the chain, because this was sort of, they do those reply chains, someone had also suggested the fact that we only saw Ian's successful leap. How many times did Ian leap to find somebody that could actually successfully contact Ben and avert the future that we saw in Judgment Day? So, I mean, that's yet another wrinkle that if you're going to start playing this head game, who knows? Ian could still be out there leaping, or did they somehow come back to the future, or was, I'm like Magic. I have a headache when it comes to that episode. But my whole thing, again, sacrifice as the engine of leaping. I've been thinking about it since, and I failed to ask one vital question, and I don't know why Magic didn't ask the question. I know that it alludes to God, fate, time, whatever. Sacrifice to who? Sacrifice to what? Sacrifice implies that you're giving yourself or some kind of integral part of yourself in service of another. So, again, are we talking about God here, or is it just like a more general sacrifice in like an altruistic sense? I'm still like just thrumming with this stuff. Did this spark any kind of other thoughts in your mind about this stuff, Matt?
Yeah, much the same for me. I mean, I think sacrifice can be quite a common theme throughout a lot of religions, so it's certainly not incompatible with this concept of God, fate, time, whatever. But how you describe that sacrifice, and I think that observation about Ian is really helpful, because it does get us thinking, well, actually, yes, the Sam sacrifice, the Ben sacrifice, they're somewhat similar, but sacrifice comes in all shapes and sizes. So we don't know enough. I mean, this is a theory of Tom's anyway, but if it turns out to be true, there's simply not enough leapers out there to be able to really understand what the extent of that might mean. Nor do I think it ever should. It's one of those things that I hope is a great unanswered question throughout the Quantum Leap franchise and is never clarified, because it gives us bigger topics for discussion than simply GTF dubs.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And, like the completist in me and the completist in you, I'm sure we want it answered, but it's like, be careful of what you wish for. Yeah. Because once it's pat and dry, then it loses all of its mystique. It loses its mystery. And I think that that's an integral part of the enjoyment of it all, is having these kinds of conversations. I mean, we did have another leaper, Al Calavici.
Yep.
He made it home okay. I mean, obviously it was because Sam decided to sacrifice himself again to get Al home, but does that mean that the fact that Sam never came home was the sacrifice that Al made to get home himself? Like, and him suffering through that? It speaks to some of the bigger themes of this episode with losing your best friend in time. That's a type of sacrifice too.
Well, but Al didn't choose to leap. Al had that thrust upon him by circumstance. So maybe that's why he never then, outside that episode, he didn't then go on leaping. Obviously, we know within the plot of the episode it's because Sam targeted the leap to take over Al, blah, 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 blah. But Al didn't sacrifice anything, and Al does not go on to become a leaper. Al is just there in someone's life for that one episode and then switch back out again.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And yeah, he's sort of like the unintentional leaper, right? The accidental leaper.
Yeah.
He might be the only one.
And so he wasn't suitable to become a leaper. There is no way. What would have happened if Sam had not done what he did? Who knows? Maybe he wouldn't have ever leapt because he's not really a leaper. He just got caught up in some magnifoozled lightning bolt.
Wow, I never even considered that. I always figured that if Sam hadn't gone back, well, Al would have died anyway. He would have been dead. So
yeah, true.
That's
Yes.
neither here nor there. So Sam had to go back to save Al.
We're getting onto big philosophical discussions then. And so, yeah, if Al had died, then he would never have leaped. So my point still stands. Al didn't sacrifice anything, and thus he never would have actually become a leaper properly. He just would have been plopped in someone's place and had an aura and all that stuff, but not really been a leaper in the traditional sense. Just some guy that died in his younger years.
Right. How old was Tom? He had to be in his early 20s, right? When he
Something
came
like that,
home from PO. Yeah, so maybe 24. If Al had gotten stuck in Tom's body, he would have gotten a second childhood, so to speak. He would have been in his young 20s again. And had he not leapt, he could have waited it out and eventually gotten to Project Quantum Leap. He would have been an old man, but he could have approached the project sometime in the late 90s, 94.
Yeah, but it's Al's body in the 40s, so Al would have been a very old man.
Well, if he's in Tom's body.
Yeah, but
See,
he's not
that's
in
the
Tom's
thing.
body.
Is also, it's like,
don't-
yeah, is he going to be, is it quote Al there, or is it Tom's aura? So
Chris, it's a body leap. Don't, no. We're not going to have this discussion about whether it was a mind leap or a body leap in the original series.
So what?
Come on, Chris.
So from everybody else's point of view, Tom is going to drop dead at like age 42 because Al would have been at that point 97.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I don't buy it.
That was exactly the risk that Sam went through in every episode.
But we never said if they were stuck, would he die according to the lifetime of the leapee or to the lifetime of the leaper? Interesting question.
It's his body just with an aura around it, and I cannot believe we're having this discussion at the end. Again. At the tail end of a long podcast about one episode of the new series. We are not going to talk about the original series and the physics of it, please. If anybody wants to weigh in on this, there are many ways that you can contact us to tell Chris he's wrong.
All right, so that's Matt's. He's saying, okay, I'm getting the move on. He's rolling his finger. Come, move on. Okay, yes, there are many ways to contact me and tell me I'm wrong. You can, as I said, drop us a line at PO Box 542, Bayport, New York 11705. You can get us by phone at 707-847-6682. You can email us at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/quantumleappodcast. You can also Instagram us at quantumleappodcast or X us at Quantum Leap Pod. And you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Quantum Leap Podcast. And as I mentioned, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Quantum Leap Podcast. Just remember, we may use your response on an upcoming episode of the Quantum Leap Podcast. And upcoming episodes, again, let me reiterate this. The Quantum Leap After Show. Go and see that after you've listened to this. You will see Albert Burge and Hayden McQueenie and John Irons discussing this episode, probably with a lot more insight and experience than Matt and I can ever bring to it. And we encourage you to do that. Again, that's youtube.com/The Quantum Leap Podcast. And Matt, I believe you have something to pitch, plug, promote.
Yes. So, this is very cool. If you happen to live in the New York area, which one of our podcast hosts does, there's a new musical starting imminently called The Connector at the MCC Theatre in NYC, and it stars a certain Mr. Scott Bakula. Tickets are available from November 16th. And from what I've been told, on the February 3rd performance, between performances, Scott's going to be doing a Q&A live and in person for the fans. So if you're interested in going, and if you're in the area, tickets are available from November 16th, and do try and aim for that February 3rd performance, because it sounds like it's going to be a treat for the fans. I'm sure every other performance is going to be a treat for the fans anyway, but that's going to be extra special.
Yeah, so it's called The Connector, and it's at the MCC Theater in New York City. And yeah, that's just a short train ride away from me, but musical? Not even Scott Bakula. I don't know. I'd really have to see it.
I love musicals.
This comes from the opera guy, so I know I have a double standard when it comes to that stuff, but maybe I'll check it out. And if I do, I'm sure that I'll report on it to you guys back here at the Quantum Leap Podcast. I'll certainly, if I do go, it will be February 3rd, and I will talk to Scott Bakula again. So, yeah, so if anyone is coming this way for that show, shoot me an email at quantumleappodcast@gmail.com. Maybe we'll meet up. I'll buy you a cup of coffee.
Oh, nice.
Hey, Matt, I know usually now. Okay, so I got sidetracked from our usual patter at the end. There's another episode of Quantum Leap coming up. Enlighten us.
I wish I could. It's called Secret History, and it is something of a secret.
Henry! It's me, Lawrence. Thank God. Thank God you're here.
You're bleeding. What happened?
Someone followed me. They thought I had the formula.
You're gonna be okay. Just breathe.
Cold, blue eyes.
Help! We need help!
Henry, it's real. You have to find it before they can.
We're gonna find it together, okay? So hold on, Lawrence.
Find her.
Lawrence!
This is unprecedented this season, and I'm pretty sure unprecedented last season as well. We usually have the synopsis at least a week and a half in advance. There is no synopsis out there. The official synopsis has not been released. No photos have been released yet. So I feel like I could make up a synopsis based on what little we know from the trailer at the head of the season. So there were clips from it in the trailer that aired at the end of 201. We know Ben's going to get into a fight with a Nazi. We know Hannah is back, and Ben's going to be revealing his secret life as a time traveler.
We're sure that this is this episode, or is that just logical to assume from the trailer?
It's logical to assume because we've only got 3 episodes left now, and after this, we've got A Kind of Magic, which is going to be the Salem Witch Trials episode. Gotta be. And then we've got Nomads, which everyone has been telling us is filmed in Egypt. So, process of elimination.
This is the spy episode? Or is the Egypt episode the spy episode? I don't know. It's so confusing.
There's a soundbite in the trailer where he refers to being a spy, and I thought that was the Egypt episode.
Oh, so maybe he's not a spy.
Yeah, but that's trying to clip this together from the costumes he's wearing, the outfits he's wearing, and obviously since sometimes the sounds don't match the visuals because it's a fast cut trailer, some things could be mixed up. But yeah, Hannah's back, and there's a Nazi. I don't know anything else.
Hannah's back and there's a Nazi. If that's not enticement to watch the next episode of Quantum Leap, I don't know what is. And if that's not enticement to listen to us talk about the next episode of Quantum Leap, I don't know what is. So until that time, everyone, I have been Christopher DeFilippis.
And I've been Matt Dale.
And maybe we'll see you talking about Nazis and Hannah and punching Nazis in the face.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Quantum Leap podcast, hosted by Allison, Matt, and Chris, with voice talent and contributions from Hayden McQueenie and Zoe Dean. To support the show, please go to patreon.com/Quantum Leap podcast. The executive producer of the Quantum Leap podcast is Albert Burge. Christopher DeFilippis and Hayden McQueenie are the co-executive producers. Special thanks to our producers, Harold Sullivan, Glenda Palma, Chris, aka Brackmang, Mike Covert, Jeff Kiska, Craig Riedler, Cosplay Dad, Charles Allen Gossard, and Morgan Felden. The thoughts expressed on this podcast are those of the individual and do not necessarily represent those of the Quantum Leap podcast, its partners, or affiliates. The Quantum Leap universe and all it contains is the property of Belisarius Productions and Universal Television. The Quantum Leap podcast is not affiliated with Belisarius Productions or Universal Television, and no copyright infringement is intended. The Quantum Leap podcast is a Barren Space production.
One night in Bangkok and the world's your tofu.